I'm Adrian Krieg. I'm the author of the books on the site that you're visiting. I just thought I'd talk a little bit about myself so that you have a general idea of who I am and where I'm coming from. If you want details on me personally, you can visit right on the front of the site about Krieg, and it's on the right, or I'm sorry, it's on the left-hand side on a column. You just click on that and my CV will come up. That'll give you a lot of details. But I thought I'd tell you very quickly. I immigrated to the United States from Switzerland in 1952, and I've lived in the United States on and off ever since. But in between, I also lived in Switzerland, Germany, Italy, 5 different states, and I lived in Mexico for over a year. I've visited about 120 nations in the last 30 years. I was a CEO for quite a while, 37 years. I wrote books. Prior to political books, I used to write technical books. I wrote them on plate bending machines and different types of machinery and machine tools. My biggest seller at that time had been a book that dealt with welding safety. And that's about all you need to know about me. You can, as I said before, visit my CV, and there's some pretty detailed information about my patents and all sorts of things, and about the books I've written that are pretty self-explanatory. I thought you'd be interested to know a question that I've been asked by many people. They ask me, how did I ever get to writing about politics in the 20th century? And it's really a rather interesting question. I had been a CEO for many years, and I belonged to a number of technical associations. And one of these associations in the nuclear field was very interested in getting a detailed report on the environmental movement. And the reason they were interested in this is because they sort of thought that environmental protests at various sites, generating stations around the nation, were organized. And they seemed to coincide with one another, and there seemed to be some pretty draconian organization behind all of this. So in the late 80s, I shut my plant down in 1987. In about 1988, 89, I started to do this report on the environmental movement, and it really opened my eyes. I found that not only the environmental movement, but a great deal of our society was in fact being manipulated by a very small group of people. The environmental movement was manipulated to extraordinary events. The Clamshell Alliance, for instance, which was a New England organization, was partially manipulated by the Russian GRU and NKVD, who had field agents that were advising these people on how to organize protests. I found that there was relationships between different environmental organizations, and the most damaging of all the information was that the major amount of funds collected from you, the people, by the environmentalists was going for payroll, perks, food, helicopters, jet planes, and limos for the people who ran this thing. In almost all instances, over 90% of the collected funds of these organizations was going to the maintenance and management of these funds. And this got me really interested, and I thought about this, and I said, well, if it's that way in environmental movements, perhaps it's also similar in politics. And that's when I began researching and writing books. The first book I wrote on politics and history surprised me in being a 4-star top seller on Amazon. I started researching the book in the 80s, and it was published in 1998. It was called The Satori and the New Mandarins. Although the title seems somewhat cryptic, it isn't really. Satori refers to the secret organization behind a ruler that runs something. It's a Japanese word, it comes from out of the Japanese. And Mandarins, of course, is Chinese, and the Mandarins were the political bureaucracy that ran China for centuries. The book is now unfortunately out of print, but it would also be somewhat out of date, although there's a lot of really good information in it.